It's a well-established pattern. After a high-profile terrorist attack, the media reaches out to local Muslims for their reaction. The intentions may be sincere, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good news judgment. Some 130 people slaughtered, hundreds more injured, an act of horrific violence.
And they are reacting to the tragedy.
Getting Muslim Americans on the record after a terror attack has become a cliche. After all, what do you expect them to say?
ISIS is a terrorist organization. We call them Daesh. There's absolutely nothing Islamic about them.
So why does the media make that link? Cambridge City Councilor Nadeem Mazen is one of the few Muslims to hold elective office in Massachusetts. How he reacts to such stories depends on how they're done.
What I call find a Muslim is not actually necessarily a bad thing. The problem historically is that I think sometimes journalists find any Muslim and not a Muslim who has a nuanced understanding of geopolitical happenings in the world.
Mazen says he gets along well with most of the local media, but he says some of the media isn't always so sensitive.
The reality is that there's journalists out there trying to amp up the divisiveness and trying to amp up Islamophobia.
And sometimes actual news dictates reaching out to Muslim leaders.
The third recent case of vandalism at Omaha's Islamic Center.
But even then comes the obligatory explanations.
Islam is a religion of peace. It's not a religion of hate.
Ultimately, Mazen would like to see the day when these kinds of stories just go away.
There is an ideal state where you wouldn't have to or even want to go to a Muslim. People would understand this, that Muslims worldwide, 1.7 billion of them, don't have to be responsible for the acts of literally crazy and in many cases pathologically violent people.
Amen to that. Yeah, this is one case where some local imams and mosques actually around the country actually got out ahead of it and put statements out before people felt they had to go rushing to them to get. But we were thinking about even the church shooting in South Carolina a couple of months ago. You wouldn't go running over to white churches, and you wouldn't try to make an analogy and say you just wouldn't do it.
John Salvi.
John Salvi or anything like that. So it's always because Muslims are associated with terrorism, and we haven't been able to separate that.
I do think that some Muslim leaders welcome the opportunity to say, hey, this isn't Islam, and that, they have that hashtag campaign, not in my name. I think they welcome the portrayal of of their religion in another way. And let's face it, it's being portrayed in these terrorist attacks, and I think they have every right to push back. And so, to me, it depends on how they're approached. If it's like, hi, can you,
explain this?
Yeah, can you condemn and apologize? That's a different thing. I mean, I think one example is Muslims who went to show support for the victims in the Paris attack. Are you going to not interview them?
Like, there's a lot of good stuff on NPR along those lines.
Yeah, I think avoiding them is just as bad.
You can't look at this in a vacuum, and I think I'm agreeing with Farah. There's something that seems vaguely distasteful about going up to Muslim leaders after every terrorist attack and asking them to go through the ritual of denouncing terrorism. On the other hand, we also know that that anti-Muslim violence increases after these incidents. So this is a chance to put a human face on the Muslim community. And we are in an era, unfortunately, where we have presidential candidates talking about entering all Muslims into a database.
Well, Donald Trump,
or
shutting down mosques.
Donald Trump, or if you want to go with Ben Carson, referring to them as dogs, and we have to figure out which ones are rabid. I mean, this is the reality that we're living in. So I think that giving people in the Muslim community a chance to put a human face to their community is an important thing.
Well, one factual thing to bolster what you said about the proactiveness of the community here, Mayor Walsh also immediately reached out and said, something's probably going to happen. Let's be in touch so that we know what's happening. So I wanted to put that on the table. The second thing is, you are right. The white crazy guy that goes in and kills 9 people in the Emmanuel Church, nobody will go to the white Christian churches and say what you will say. But however, let there be a black person. Welcome to my world and Farah's world. Hello, what do you think about crazy black person that just did so-and-so, Kelly? Because, that's how it goes. And so I understand totally about what they're saying. how we fix this is we begin to have people who live here. This is the fastest growing religion in the United States. Wake up everybody and include them in the rest of the stories like the normal people they are. Then when something like this happens that's particular to the experience, it doesn't feel as though you just ran over to them with a mic about something that happened that is totally opposite of what they believe in the tenets of their religion.
One of the most interesting things I heard this past week was this idea that whatever we want to call them, the Islamic State group, Daesh, has as one of its explicitly stated goals destroying what it calls the gray zone, which is this area of peaceful coexistence between Muslims and non-Muslims.
Yes.
That they have said,
That's right.
we want to achieve this end. That they hope to achieve it with attacks like the ones we just saw in Paris. So given that aim, and by the way, I should note, whatever nihilism they may embrace, they do it with a real sophisticated media strategy. They have a super slick magazine. They're good at social media. They're trying to impose their brand on Islam. So I think it is reasonable and fair to give local Muslim leaders a chance to push back and a chance to keep the gray zone alive.
But there's this implicit sense that somehow the Muslim community is responsible. And
Well,
I
again,
think
it
that's
depends
what
on
we're getting at.
how it's asked,
It does,
right?
but there was that CNN
Yes,
interview
yes.
a few days ago,
Yeah.
CNN International, where they were asking, well, you must have known about this beforehand,
Right.
insisting that they must have known.
To
and
someone
why
with
didn't
no
they?
connection to the
Yeah.
Islamic State, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was kind of a case study in how
made
not
such
to,
a
but-
great point. This is the only time we hear from people in the Muslim community. You know, if people who are Muslims were routinely asked, "What do you think of income inequality?"
Right.
then it
Right.
wouldn't seem so
Yeah.
so weird when they're only asked about
Well,
terrorism.
you don't know who man on the street. People aren't declaring their religions.
No, but I'm talking about when we go out to do stories about
Yeah.
what about kids today? Let me tell you. You know, I mean, that's
Right.
that's a story for everybody. That's not just a story for some of us. That's all I'm saying.